As you've probably seen on the program, we are presenting on navigating colonialism, modernity, and African feminisms, a socio-linguistic examination of Margaret Ogola's texts. And I'm pleased to introduce my friends, my fellow panelists here. Let me begin with Dr. Esther Lisanza. Esther is most of you know her. She's a president here, and she was introduced earlier, but I would like to mention again that she's interested in research on language and literacy development, politics of language. Sorry, there's some construction outside my building. I hope it won't interfere too much. Indigenous knowledges in Africa and women empowerment. And this afternoon, Dr. Lisanza is going to present on Leave No One Behind, an examination of gender equality in Margaret Ogola's Place of Destiny. Dr. Lisanza, if you can just wave at, yeah, all right. Our next presenter after that will be Dr. Jabet. And yeah, I know you are somewhere there. Dr. Jabet is an assistant professor at the University of Virginia, where she teaches courses, there we go, in Swahili language, literature, and cultures of Africa. And this afternoon, she's going to present on narrating female friendships and sisterhood in Margaret Ogola's The River and the Source, a text she often uses in her literature classes. Third is, oh, you were right there, Dr. Muaka. Dr. Muaka is that going to disturb you a lot? Should I move to a different room and try? Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. I think it's fine.
Okay, all right, thank you. Our third panelist is Dr. Leonard Muaka. And Muaka is an associate professor at Howard University, and today he's going to present on language activism and political discourse in Margaret Ogola's Mandate of the People. And I get this wonderful privilege to introduce myself as well. My name is Martha Micheka. I'm a professor in the English department at East Tennessee State University. I love talking about language in Africa. I am a sociolinguist, and I enjoy looking at this overlap between literature and language. And so this afternoon, I will begin the panel by looking at the text, Margaret Ogola's 2 books, which my fellow panelists are also going to be considering this afternoon. So as I begin the presentation, I'll be timing myself. I hope I don't go far beyond the given time. I'm going to share my screen. Please let me know if you can see that.
Yes, we see it.
Okay, good. Thank you. Let me get to. All right, there we go. So my presentation this afternoon is titled The Role or Place of African Languages in Modernization as Portrayed in Margaret Ogola's The River and the Source. Give me a minute. So let me begin by introducing this author that the 4 of us are going to be talking about. Margaret Ogola was born in 1958 to parents, Felix Odongo and Rina Ogunde. And her father, in 1958, which is just a few years before Kenya gained independence, her father was a civil servant and a veteran of World War II. And I mention this because it gives us some connection to the historical perspective of her work. Her work spans several generations and thus can be viewed as contributing to the literary history of Kenya. The novel, one can look at the novel more like a semi-autobiographical text, because Ogola herself says that most of what she has written in the first novel, The River and the Source, was inspired by her mother and her grandmother. I quote in the introduction of her book, she says, "The germ of this book was planted earlier in my life by my mother, Herina Odongo, whose gift as a storyteller and a Sabic wit are still the spice of our lives." So if we want, we could look at this more, the first text, The River and the Source, more as a semi-autobiographical text. Ogola was a medical doctor, but she loved writing. And in some cases, she has been referred to as the writer who became a medical doctor. It's more like what really her passion was being a writer, but she was also very passionate with her work as a medical doctor. And she wrote several texts: The River and the Source, which I'm going to look at, Cardinal Tunga, A Gift of Grace, in 1999, I Swear by Apollo, the sequel to The River and the Source, The Place of Destiny, which I believe Dr. Lisanza is addressing this afternoon, The Mandate of the People, which was published posthumously after she passed in September 2011, and Dr. Muaka will be discussing that specific text. So get to my own questions here. This afternoon, the two questions I wanted to explore were, how do Ogola's literary works, and I focus on just two of the works, The River and the Source, and I Swear by Apollo, how they reflect the changing language policies in Kenya's history. And the second question is, what can we infer from Ogola's language choice about beliefs concerning the role and place of African languages in modernization and globalization? I've read the book, The River and the Source, for several years, over and over again. I think it's one of my favorite texts. But I had never really paid that much attention to the language use until this proposal here. And so I went back to look at the way the book is structured in relation to the Kenyan language policies. So The River and the Source, and I add I Swear by Apollo as, you know, a sequel, so continuation of The River and the Source, is divided into 4 parts. And I was looking at these different parts in relation to the development of the nation Kenya. So there is the first part, the girl child, to the second part, the art of giving, third part, love and hate, and variable winds, and then on to I Swear by Apollo. And as I was looking at these different parts, I noticed that they line well with the different language policies that we've had in Kenya. So back to the first part, begins or is set in pre-colonial Kenya. And this section, the girl child, the main character, Akoko, is born around the 1870s. And that first part ends with her return back to her home, her parents' home as a young widow. And it's set at around, so we can see this happening around the pre-colonial period, 1870s. Kenya was colonized in 1885. So that's around the time part 1 is set. Part 2 is set around the so if we think, even before I go too far, if we think of what Ogola is doing in part one, it's going to be what is happening in the nation during the pre-colonization period. So, and about that time, before 1885, of course, if you're talking of any language policies, any education was, or any culture was transmitted through the native languages. And towards the end of that first period, the missionaries have already come to Kenya. The indigenous languages are still being used because missionaries argued that the best way to present information to the natives is to present it in their own languages. So that goes with what is going on in part one before we move on to part two and part three of this text. So I took part one and was trying to see how does Ogola reflect those policies in her part one of the text. And I noticed that all the names of the characters in part one and towards part two of the text, well, they have local names. If that counts as part of the language. The child who is born born to Chief Odero Gogni, son of Chief Gogni Adinda. The baby herself is named Adoyo Obanda Akoko. Notice there's no Martha influence there or any of the British names yet. The girl child who is born in this part one is married to Chief Owor Kembo. Their first child is named Obura Kembo, and the second one is Odero or Nyabera. So the names are strictly traditional names, Luo names, no influence at all during this first part. And if you haven't read the text, you might be wondering, well, if the main character is Akoko, then it's going to remain Akoko all through the text. But let's see what happens as the text proceeds. In this first part as well, the language used is, Ogola employs a very interesting use of multilingualism. She uses, the text is in English, but she uses a lot of Luo names, Luo terms in the text. By the time you finish reading part one, you feel as if you've been introduced not just to the culture, but to the language. She talks, for instance, of it was fit to inspire praise songs from Nyatiti players. Some instances, she doesn't even explain who those are because to her, it's so obvious. How can you not know Nyatiti players? We know them. Or she talks of, and the way her chieno, her traditional skin, hang gracefully from her tiny waist, swaying so beautifully at her back. She talks of Were must have carved them out personally. Another girl could be given to the chief with great nyadi. Therefore, they were satisfied with the Miha, the new wife of the chief. And it goes on, and you see all this in the text. By the way, the text itself has these Luo terms italicized, so they are very easy to pick out. When you turn to one page, like this one, page 25, all these texts are italicized, and they are in here. So you finish that page knowing that they are Nyatiti players. Chieno, the traditional skin worn around the waist. Were is the god worshipped by the people. Great Nyati, great style. Miha is the new wife of the chief. Mikai is the first wife. Notice how quickly she introduces us to the culture, because the policy, if we talk of a policy, is the native language is what is used. It continues on. She talks about, it was about 30 seasons before the great snaking metal road of Jorochere, the white people, reached the battering market of Kisuma. Again, she introduces us to the Jorochere, the white people. There's a name for them, and it's okay to call them by that name. She talks of Chik, the way of the people. She talks of Jodongo, our elders, and Kongo, our local brew. So you are all going to learn this language as you read through that first part, and so freely as introduced by the author. She talks about Migogo, a woman who has been married and left the home, who is supposed to come back probably just for funerals. She talks of dark, the neighborliness, and what, a concept that encompasses brotherhood. She talks of lazy people who are the Jomifuadis. She talks of the Nak ceremony and various terms, various Luo concepts, and they are spread all over. All these are just between pages 13 and 15. So you can imagine how much of the Luo language is here in the text. I'm not going to go through each one of them here, but there are several during this first section of the text. And then there's change. Before we get to the end of part 1, remember the girl child is born in 1870, Kenya is colonized in 1885. So before the end of that first part, the colonial rule has started, and so has the language change. And we have changes like this one here. Akoko is going to seek help, not from the Jodongo, the Council of Elders, but from the district officer. And a conversation ensues between her and her nephews. And she says, I see we no longer call the place Kisuma. The Serikali, Swahili term for government. So now we have a Swahili term. The Serikali has changed that to Kisumu. Also, the big white chief is called a Dio. Eventually, to another page, it says, they reached the district officer's office and were stopped by 2 askaris. Askaris is Swahili for soldiers or policemen. So you notice the shift here. Before, there were several Luo terms, the native language of the people, but of that particular group. But now we are getting a different language here, and it's Kiswahili. The colonization is already happening, and there's the construction of the railway line, which means people are moving from other parts of the country, and so the local group has been, I would say, invaded by other language speakers, and now we have Kiswahili coming in. By the time we get to part 2 and 3, the names have started changing. Akoko herself is baptized, and she's called Veronica Akoko. So unlike that first part where we had Luo names only, now we have English names coming in. So there's Veronica Akoko. Her daughter is called Maria Nyabera. There's Elizabeth Awiti, there's Petro, there's Mark Sigu. So we see changes in not just what is going on culturally, but there are changes in names as well. And as these changes happen, the people are embracing them, and this is going to influence their language and their culture as well. A quote from page 102 says, so proud was Nyabera of her new name that when she went back to Yimbo, she insisted that her mother and child call her Maria. So the change, not just in the culture and what is going on, but change in names as well. And we notice that the English language with colonization, the English language is becoming attractive. When Akoko's granddaughter, Elizabeth Awiti, meets her future husband, she notices that and probably is attracted to his English, and quotes page 129 says, why is it that you're always alone? That is the future husband to be asking. He spoke in perfect English, and there's a comment here, it was perfect English. There's that notice of perfect English that is an attraction. So he had switched to a combination of English and vernacular, more reflecting the policies going on. Perfect English is attractive, but there's also the emerging bilingual and trilingual nature of the African. Then as we go on to part 3, we have the text is pretty much English and Kiswahili. There are very few evidences of the Luo language that we saw in part 1. So here in part 3, we see Kiswahili terms like chapatis and dengu and harambe and muzungu, not jorochere anymore. We see matatu, we see shamba, daktari, mwalimu. So I hope you're noticing this language shift here, because we are getting to independence, where the new nation has adopted a language policy of English as the official language, Kiswahili as the national language, but a national language that doesn't really stand at the same level as English, because it's not the language of instruction in the schools. So we have a good example here towards the end of the text, where one of the characters, Wandia, who is a medical doctor, married to a grandson of the main character, Coco, she comes home and says, does this child ever eat the mid-morning snack of fruits I told you to give him? Asked Wandia in her bad Swahili. And the maid, the house help, replies, Ndio mama, in her beautiful coastal accent. Now, note that Wandia is a medical doctor, but speaks in bad Swahili, and there's no cause for alarm as long as she's fluent in English. The policy doesn't necessarily push for fluent Swahili. And we see that reflected in the policy here. So, and then when we shift to the I swear by Apollo, by the time we get to I swear by Apollo, the text is entirely in English. There's hardly any multilingualism there. And once in a while, when there's use of Kiswahili, it's one word thrown in here or there, just like a foreigner could do in the language. So I have one incident that I could find where Johnny is a great grandson of the main character. Johnny's dad is from Canada. And so Johnny says, after all, a man had to have some pride, bwana. And the use of that is not necessarily showing a presence of multilingualism as such. It's shifting to that point where English has really become the language of the people. And if they throw in one or two Kiswahili words, they are not necessarily to show that there's fluency in the language. Now, so I get, having looked through the way Ogola is using the language here, I understand that she wasn't necessarily setting out to show the language situation in Kenya, but being true to literature, she shows that the language situation in the country has shifted because literature reflects life of the people. And she begins the text at a point where the ethnic languages, the indigenous languages are powerful. They are the ones that are used to communicate education, to communicate culture, but over time they haven't been emphasized. So they are being left behind as the country transitions to English use and continues on to English as the official language, Kiswahili as the national language, but a national language that doesn't necessarily carry the same weight as English. So gradually, as we get to the end of the text, we see how the language policies have impacted language choice in the various domains, including choices authors make even in their fiction works. So the decision to promote English and Kiswahili over the Kenyan indigenous languages can be seen marginalizing the ethnic languages in the text, even as reflected in Ogola's fiction works. I think I'm going to stop here so that we have time for others to move on. I will ask that we hold our questions to the end, and you can post them in the chat. I don't know if they are there already. So I'm going to welcome Dr. Lisanza to continue with the panel.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Micheka. I'm going straight away to my presentation. And as you can see from the program, I'll be looking at Leave No One Behind, an examination of gender equality in Margaret Ogola's Place of Destiny. So this afternoon, I'll be examining gender equality, of course, in the Place of Destiny. And Place of Destiny is a novel published 2005, whose protagonist is a female character named Amma. And immediately we meet Amma. She's battling liver cancer, and later on she succumbs to the disease. As indicated at the back of the book, Place of Destiny is a story of love, suffering, grief, separation and reunion, and the contemplation of life, death, and life after death. It is a masterful tapestry of characters whose lives intertwine to weave an intriguing plot. Like an onion, each layer peels off to reveal an even deeper and more stinking layer. Thus begins a journey of pain and disguised blessings, of sad news and pleasant surprises for Amma and her family and friends. Each major character takes their turn to reflect, share, disappoint, and inspire each other, thus leading the reader beyond that inevitable end point of life, that place of destiny. And gender equality is a strong theme which runs through the novel. This theme is exemplified by 5 main characters: Amma Lore, the protagonist of the novel, Mwagera Murema, Imani Mwagera, Malaika Mwagera, and Dr. Igana Mango. This is a family of 5. And of course, we come later on to meet Dr. Igana Mango, who happens to be the doctor of Amma. To introduce you to Amma, Amma is a business executive who owns a big business solely. From the start of the novel, Amma introduced herself without mixing words. She states, "I own a business specializing in finding and placing skilled persons in jobs where their skills and strengths will be optimally used. We are also in advertising." Her husband adds the following pertinent information about his wife. "She's a woman very much involved with living her life, and from the beginning made it clear that ours would be a partnership of equals, and support I gave would be with these facts always in mind. A fiercely independent woman. She quite early mapped out the paths for her life and the means to achieve her own dream." That's according to page 135 of the novel. Amma is married to Mwagera Mrema. Mwagera is a history professor. Amma has the following to say about her husband. "I finally realized the reason why he towers head and shoulders above other men for me is because of his innate gentleness and true goodness. I support that this arises out of the fact that he's happy and comfortable enough with the person he is to let other people be who they wish to be without feeling threatened and excluded." Amma and Mwagera have 4 children: Imani, Yoga, Malaika, Hawi, and Pala. Hawi and Pala are still young. Imani is the firstborn. The reader meets Imani as a teacher in Kambi Yabogo Mixed School, whose main source of entertainment appears to be, that this is according to the novel, to be going on strike for various real and imagined grievances. When it comes to actual learning, they are passive to the extreme and will not flex an intellectual muscle voluntarily. That's according to page 79. Despite the challenges, Imani is determined to stay because, according to her, these two are citizens of this country and deserving of good and education as they can. Imani was a math and physics major in college. She loves being a teacher so as to teach children the wonders of science and the logic of mathematics. That's according to page 81. Iman later becomes a teacher at the orphan school. That's the name of that school. And Malaika is the second born. She's studying architecture. She would like to build more cities. She also would like to build decent houses for the poor. Malaika wonders, and this is a direct quote from her. She says, surely a basic family housing unit consisting of at least a living room, cooking, ablutions, and 2 separate sleeping areas for children and adults should be the norm rather than the rare exception for the lucky few. There are cost-effective, user-friendly materials that can be used to build replicable houses for millions. And we meet Dr. Igana Mago, who is Ama's physician, is a hospice doctor who volunteers at the orphan school. He's a former street boy. His mother conceived him when she was 16 years old. His mother leaves her maternal home for the city because of her father, who couldn't bear seeing her with a child. The mother later dies and Igana is left to defend himself. Igana gets a second chance by being enrolled in school at a children's home. Later, he gets married to Imani. They both have a little girl who is named after her deceased grandma, Ama. So looking at the theme of gender equality, the 5 main characters who I mentioned are examples of what gender equality, or better still, gender equity is. And in the following section, I will exemplify how each of these characters lead to gender equality and equity. I'll start with Ama. As mentioned, Ama has 4 children. She has 3 girls and 1 boy. Each of these children have been modeled by Ama to be a powerhouse in the society irrespective of their gender. Pala, the 13-year-old boy, credits the man he has become to his mother. Though born with cerebral palsy, this boy is generally helped through the efforts of the mother. At school, he is beyond his grade level. He's a little genius, as his sisters refer to him. This little genius learned a lot from his mother, especially to be strong and independent. Pala says the following after his mother's death: in life, my mother was a strong and single-minded woman who has made me the man I am today. Ama's 3 daughters have all been sent to school and college. As young adults, they've already started making a difference in the society. On one hand, the one year Imani was in the rural school, she was able to make a difference in the lives of her students, especially the girls. The girls were able to see that a girl like Imani can excel in sciences and math. After her mother's death, Imani is now teaching orphans. On the other hand, Malaika hopes after her studies, she will be able to make a difference in the lives of the poor families. She's also considering joining politics to advocate for the poor. Ama has not only made a difference in the lives of her children, but also at her company. As mentioned, she is a CEO in her own company. She's empowering everyone in the company irrespective of his or her gender. Lanoi Sobesha is one of the characters who happens to be Ama's personal assistant, through whom the reader learned so much about her boss. She had the following to say concerning Ama: her great success is her attitude to people. She's the kind of person who believes that even the office messenger has something valuable from which all might learn. Ama does not belittle anyone irrespective of their gender and position. Lanoi herself cannot believe the news from Ama that she would take a master's degree in business administration so that she can be better positioned to one day take over the running of Ama Arts. As Lanoi joins Ama's company, she only has a BA, but Ama is going to support her to go back to school and be able to get that MBA and be able to be a leader in the company in the years to come. And of course, what we are seeing here is that Ama is a business leader. who is all about capacity building and building the leaders of the next generation. Finally, at the level of our relationship with the husband, she believes that everyone is both allowed and encouraged to reach the sky whenever they imagine that sky to be. That's according to page 43. They are both husband and wife, that's Ama and her husband. They are out to empower each other. One's gender is not a barrier to progress in this particular relationship. They are equals in their relationship. Let's now look at the husband. Mwagera Mrema is a man who is stable and confident enough to let his wife realize her potential in this world. He is not shy to heap her with all praises. In terms of financial independence, he says, direct quote, Ama is a genius at managing money. Indeed, she and money have an affinity for each other. He continues to say, the real game for her is running a competitive business, while the passion of her life is ensuring the well-being of those she holds dear. This man has come a full cycle in coming to terms with the fact that a wife can be in control of her life and manage her business successfully without the husband feeling insecure. There is no question that Mwagera, as a father, has played a major role in making sure all his children, irrespective of their gender, go to school and get a better education. This is why his daughters and son are turning out to be people of substance in the society. Also, both Mwagera and his wife are an example to their children on how a husband and wife should treat each other with respect and devotion. Imani stated the following concerning her dad. You know, Mama always lived on her own terms. She had no sense of fear. No wonder Dad was devoted to her. Mwagera is mature enough to let his wife be independent, and that was the strength of their marriage. Imani and Malaika are empowered in their own right, just as their mother. They are excelling in fields which stereotypically are for men. The other has created women who are excelling in mathematics, in science, and architecture, just as men. And finally, let's look at Dr. Igana Mago. The other has finally, as I would like to say, empowered the wretch of the earth, the record of the earth, in the name of Igana Mago, a former street boy. No matter one's background, with hard work and societal support, anyone can rise from the ashes. And it's not really about hard work, it's also about societal support. That's really important if we are really going to empower everybody in the society. A former street child is now a physician. He is also empowering foreign-born children as he was once. He's volunteering at the orphan school. Dr. Mago is empowering both girls and boys in this school. Also, he's married to Imani. Later on, he gets married to Imani. And just like his father-in-law, he's there to support his wife to reach her full potential as a teacher, a mother, and a wife. For example, in the novel, it supports Iman's idea of converting one of the classrooms to be a dorm in the evening for the girls. This was very important to Imani because she knows how girls are vulnerable, especially at night, with no one to turn to. And finally, before I finish with my presentation, I would like to end with this final quote, and this is directly from the novel. Margaret Ogola says the following: just because you cannot help, and according to me, I'm interpreting that to be empower everybody, does not mean you cannot at least empower someone. You may not empower everybody, but at least you can empower one person. So the fact is, in African society, everybody can be helped or empowered to realize their power, their full potential, irrespective of their gender. Asanteni sana. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lisanza. quickly transition to Dr. Jabet.
Thank you so much, Dr. Micheka and Dr. Lisanza. You have presented so wonderfully that I don't know if I'm gonna match your presentations. Anyway, so I'm going to talk about narrating female friendships and sisterhood in the river and the source. And Dr. Micheka has talked a lot about the book, and I think you will be able to follow along with the examples that I'll give. Just a little bit, just to remind you about the book, as Dr. Micheka had mentioned, it's about a Akoko and 3 generations of women and who lived during the pre-colonial era and through to the post-colonial period. Akoko is a very hardworking woman living in a deeply hegemonic society. It's also a story about her daughter and granddaughters, Nyabera and Awiti. And in this story, the river and the source, Ogola is trying to forefront women's voices, which is a paradigm shift from women who are always taking backstage, yet they are very central in the society. So I'm going to look at female friendships and sisterhood as a feminist practice, and I'm going to follow along these scholars that have described female friendships and sisterhood. And they describe them as friendships as necessary because they are a catalyst for support and empowerment for women. There are space for women to reinvent themselves, a space for women to nurture each other, and an avenue to confront injustices and oppression. This scholars, as I've mentioned, they conceive female friendships as a feminist practice, and I will discuss how these descriptions apply to Ogola's text. And I'll also disrupt some of these Western ideas about female friendships according to the cultural context in Ogola's text. So the Western feminist idea of solidarity is that women work as allies, they fight together, they respect each other and value knowledge, difference, and ongoing relationships and collective action. It also is an expansion of alliances necessary in order to extend contemporary feminism as an effective and a large-scale project. So female solidarity is very important. So I analyze. So I analyze Ogola's text through the lens of these scholars, and I can't forget to acknowledge the differences in feminisms that these Black feminisms, African feminisms, the particular feminism that Margaret Ogola is talking about. And then we know that some of the ideas of Western feminism that do not apply or to the context that Ogola is talking about. So in Ogola's text, we see Akoko, the matriarch, as the trainer of her daughters on what sisterhood and solidarity means. She taught them through her example and also in practical ways. We see evidence of solidarity and sisterhood as it manifests itself through her grandchildren, growing up and embracing other women friendships, sharing stories, empowering each other, and through the unmuting of women's social presence by giving voice to women. We see the empowering of women And this is similar to what Biana 2020 discusses as two kinds of oppressed voices. She notes that there's those who had been forced to silence due to patriarchal oppression, and we also see those women who have been oppressed and have never learned to speak. We see these instances in the text. We also see actions of resistance where women in Ogola's text embrace monogamy and resist polygamy. We also see Akoko going back to her father's home because she cannot accept to be in a polygamous marriage. And we also see all of Akoko's daughters, Nyabera, Awiti, and even her daughter-in-law, Wandia, all have monogamous marriages, a symbol of liberation from patriarchy. We see also Akoko and her daughter Maria or Nyabera. They join hands to fight against patriarchal domination, and they leave that context and embrace Christianity, imagining it to be a space of agency and freedom. We also see a lot of what Ogola thinks as the idea of sisterhood and solidarity in her text. She discusses it as where women support each other, women advocate for each other, women nurture each other and train the young girls in nurturing. We see Hooks recommends training women about solidarity and liberatory politics. That is something that we see in the text. Women embrace sisterhood, resistance, and accommodation. So, how is the text a liberatory political project that Hooks is talking about? So, Bell Hooks' idea of this liberatory project, she says it includes confronting injustices, resisting male domination, and it is a transformative action and a political action. When we look at the text, Ogola's idea of feminism is a non-liberatory project. However, it does not mean passivity. And it's about multiple ways of demonstrating agency. So we see how in the text women demonstrate agency. For example, we see Vera, who is Elizabeth's daughter. She refuses to go to the high school she was selected after finishing her primary school. And she had very high qualifications, was selected to go to a very good high school, highly ranked, but she refuses to go there. And she wanted to go to a lower ranked high school just to be with her sister so that they can support each other. Or we see when Wandia, that is Elizabeth's daughter-in-law, she wants to go to college to pursue her education, and all her sisters-in-law encourage her to go and not worry because they will help support her children and her family. We see how Akoko makes a personal decision that she will not be a co-wife. She exercises her agency and her voice in that way. And we see how different it is from Hooke's idea of a transformative action, because we see even though Akoko does not exercises her own agency, she does not. This does not appear to be a transformative societal change. It's only on her personal level. Even though other women in the same society would accept the polygamous situation and having co-wives. We also see resistance in the book when Akoko's husband is pressured to marry another wife because Akoko was not bearing a male child. Her action of protest was to leave her husband's house for her father's house. Or when Akoko's brother-in-law tried to usurp the chieftaincy meant to be bestowed to her grandson, she left and went to the district office, the colonial government, to seek help. which she received. We also see instances of accommodation where women accommodate other things that are going on in their tradition and in their culture. For example, when elders arrange for a marriage for Akoko's daughter, Nyabera, after her husband died, Akoko allowed that culture or custom because she saw no injustice in it. So these are some of the elements that are core principles of African feminism as discussed in the book. So we see that the difference between Akoko and Hooke's feminism, as I've said, the liberatory project, we see that agency implies as their capacity to act, an active agent, or provide a different narrative to the norm. And we see in Akoko, in Ogola's book, that agency sometimes is not explicit. It's sometimes innate. It's visible in some actions. It is when one recognizes their interests, their desires, pushes against customs to achieve self-worth and self-sufficiency. So it's not outward. In the text, it doesn't show itself outward as what Hooks was describing. We also see agency in Akoko. We are told that she was a very hardworking woman, and she even had more wealth, double than what was paid for her dowry. She was an agent of change in her own way, and she demonstrated that she can earn what she wanted through her hard work. We see also Akoko's move, her agency. We see her agency when she moves from cruel traditions to the city, to the district office. She did not mobilize other women to do the same. She did not enact changes in her society, but her agency was part of her pursuit of self-fulfillment. An example of what her daughters learned from Akoko, we see that when Awiti became an advocate of her daughter-in-law when she wanted to study abroad. So Elizabeth, that is Awiti, when her daughter-in-law Wandia wanted to study abroad, she asked her daughter-in-law Wandia, is he her son? That is, she's asking her, does my son or your husband give you a hard time? Is he against you studying in America? So she wanted to make sure that her son is not giving Wandia a hard time. So she was somehow an advocate of or self-fulfillment, what women want to do. And she said, we will support you. So we also see, as I had mentioned before, Becky. Becky is Elizabeth's daughter. We see how she exercises her autonomy when she decides to become an air hostess against what her dad wanted her. Her dad wanted her to be a teacher, but she wanted to do what she felt she was interested in or fulfill her desires. The text says that she wanted what mattered to her, not what anybody else felt. She also marries someone from a different race. She marries a Canadian. That was not common, but that was her desire. So when thinking about Hooke's idea of a liberatory movement, we know that it was based on a societal context that demanded action and activism. Hooke's was focused on systems of oppression and discrimination that granted power and privilege to some groups in the society and not others. So therefore, Hooke's was suggesting a transformative and revolutionary action to promote immediate social change and end all exploitation and discrimination of Black women. In time, we see that African traditional societies also have continued to embrace modernity and discarded original male and female roles of men and women as partners in their society. And the ideals that Hook discusses now applies to society or to the South African societies today. So there is need for transformative action to expose, confront injustices and the silencing of women in the post-colonial society, because silence will only contribute to more oppression. So here is where feminist solidarity becomes a tool for empowerment. So facing interruptions in solidarity and friendships through unlearning sexism. In the book, we see how there are interruptions in female solidarity. And women sometimes speak against other women. They gossip. Women alienate other women. And in these cases, they break or interrupt friendship bonds. In the text, we see how women were part of talking against a Koko, because a Koko could not give birth to a son. Women started gossiping about her, and this led to her leaving her home. So such things interrupt the friendship bonds. And at the same time, Hook says that solidarity is not the same as support. To experience solidarity, we must have a community of interests, shared beliefs, and goals around which to unite to build sisterhood. Bates, another scholar, says that women are their own worst enemy. And what's really holding us back is how we, bitchy girls, hate one another's success and brushing off incidences of sexism and oppression. So these are things that are facing female friendships and sisterhood. So there's need to unlearn sexism, and there's need to avoid brushing off incidences of sexism and oppression. Women continue to share their stories, which not always invoke solidarity, because solidarity implies that there's a shift from individual experience to collective experience, or women working together. So according to Hooks and these other scholars, it's hoped that a lot more people will speak against the normalization of sexism and oppression, and solidarity means action and community building and social change. And these are things that we see in the text that have that really helped the women in the text.
Dr. Anne, sorry to interrupt. When your topic is facing interruptions, we have about 2 more minutes.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Okay, so let me go quickly to the next one. So as we have talked, as I have mentioned, solidarity is central to collective working and resistance. And there's this adage that says we are each other's keepers, the personal is political. But in some cases, we see little consideration is given to ways in which the personal, the private, and the public spaces show forms of resistance. So in conclusion, I would say that according to Ogola's text, we can say that feminist solidarity is necessary. And one thing I should mention is that it should include men as allies. I have heard from Dr. Lisanza about her talking about Magera and the wife, and how Magera was an ally to the wife. The text in Ogola also mentions similar examples. For example, Elizabeth's husband was an ally to the wife. And we see how he supported her, he listened to her even when she was sick. He respected her, he helped her in the house even when other friends or his male friends were frowning against him. he still was adamant in helping the wife. We've also seen how Hoekstra talked about training other women. In this text, it looks like it's not just training about other women, it's training young women. That is more helpful in female solidarity. And I will stop there. And yes, I will stop there.
Thank you. Dr. Muaka, you have about 15 minutes, and then we'll have some 10 minutes or so for questions. If you want, you can go ahead and start posting your questions in the chat.
You are muted.
Again, thank you so very much. Somebody muted me, so I didn't know I was still muted. Anyway, thank you again for this opportunity. I'm speaking after wonderfully presented analysis of Margaret Ogola's works. My portion is really to look at her last book, which is Mandate of the People. It is a book that is written, as already mentioned, after her death, and it is an important book. When she writes it, it was in her last days, but she had a message for her people. So I'm going to begin by doing a very brief introduction of what it is that I'm going to do and how I'm going to do that. And then I will proceed with some aspects from the text itself. So very briefly, this is what I intend to do. The main purpose, of course, of this story was to show society and the people who are determined to bring a change. It is a book that reflects what many countries in young democracies undergo. It is also a book that demonstrates what happens during campaign periods. So figuratively and literally in Kenya now is what we may call electioneering period. So what Ogola is saying in her book is very true almost all the time, because the term for parliamentarians is usually 5 years, and every time it is that very 5 years coming that they'll be looking at. This book is indeed a good book, if you may want to say that. And what I want to do now is to see how she empowers the different groups, especially the vulnerable groups within the society, to be able to rise to the occasion and do what it is supposed to be done. It is, as already said, a book set in Kenya, but it is also a book that writes about an imaginary constituency. Specifically, there are two. One is called Migodi North, and the other one is called Migodi South. It is a book that shows that even though women are not on the ballot, that they are very influential in one way or the other. We see this with Adam Adage, whose wife and a very important person influences him to run for the seat. We also see this with the incumbent who, for some reason, because of how politics play out, he is forced to go back to her for consultation. We are looking at a book that really has to be analyzed by way of looking at what I'm using here, discourse, critical discourse analysis, because we're talking about politics and because we want to see how the author tries to bring out the points that her characters are supposed to convey. It is a book that reminds us, as I quote, rather I reference Euphrates Kizlabi, one of the Swahili authors, who also looks at her home village, Ukerewe in Tanzania, and says it's a forgotten place where development is never visible, but you'll see people at the end of the 5-year term trying to woo voters with different sorts of gifts. So this is a story that really mirrors a lot of things that happen in developing countries. Ogola's work can be analyzed under what I've said, CDA, because of the different ways that the social actors are introduced and use language to convey what it is that they want to. In politics, it's persuasion that you have to work with. It is how you contextualize yourself, but also the footing. So I'm using here Goffman, who talks about footing, and I'm also using indexicality, which shows what you're indexing in terms of your position. But therefore, what also this does, it brings about identity marking and identification. In other words, who am I and who are they? Who is he? Who am I? And because of that, this becomes more of an interdisciplinary kind of approach to look at the work. Wardock 1999 actually puts it even better when she says that the CDA aims to unmask ideologically permeated and often obscure structures of power, political control, and dominance. So definitely this is what we see as we look at some of the players in this book. So we will go ahead, we can legitimize, as politicians do, what they want to say and what they don't want to say. And here again, we call upon Van de Dijk, who has written a lot about CDA, to be able to help us understand just how politicians use this. So within that broader framework, you also find voicing, which is also brought about by Bertin. You also find what I call the works of, or whatever the aspects of pathos, logos, and ethos that you find in all Greek literature. But these are important for us. So let's see how this works out in terms of politics and power. The book is about politics. It really revolves around three main characters. One of them is Adams Agade, who is a newcomer on the scene, but we also have the old guards. The old guards, we have JJ Sori and Katambo, or popularly known to his followers as GK, Gwala. So these are people who are going to be presenting the case to the people. They want to be able to be elected. Gwala is this person who was dislodged by, sorry is this candidate who was dislodged by Gwala because of his old history. His track record was not good enough. And because of that, he has to find a different party to be able to contest in the next elections. So what happens here, these are the two people who are going to be fighting each other. They forget about Adams because he's a newcomer. No one knows about him. And this is why what he does well is to really blackmail the other opponent. This is Gwala. So what he does is to say, Sori is a dirty person. He's a devil worshiper. And as soon as you say that, what happens is everybody shifts away from you because you're practicing what we call the world of the sorcerers. And what he does also is now to really find more powerful people who are going to give him a ticket to the August House, as they call it. He goes ahead and goes beyond the borders of Kenya and goes to Tanzania. Why? He believes in Tanzania, the power is more powerful there. The power of the magicians is more powerful compared to the Kenyans. So GK will stop at nothing to get to this particular August House. And he's fighting, literally he's fighting his opponent, Sori. This fame and power does not seem to extend to the people. It is only about him. What he wants is to get access to power, money, and influence. And he is given the first chance to show what he can do at a place, a stage which is really for him. It's called Embe Moja. Embe Moja is a Swahili phrase, which is an equivalent of one mango. But what also the author is trying to show us is just how forgotten this place is. As I've already said, it's one of those areas in rural areas which is really, really forgotten. So the choice of this word is very specific and very intentional. He begins by trying to, bring in his people. He says, wananchi watukufu. I know Martha has talked about the use of language in her books, but this is something you see across the board here. So these are most glorious people on page 13. Now, what it is, he says, leo ni leo. What does this mean? Today is the day. We have a new way of looking at things. What he wants to convince the electorate that he is going to be the change that they have been looking forward to. We have no industry, parts of what he says. We have no industry here. And when I become your MP, because I know you'll elect me, poverty will be a thing of the past. He's very confident about this. But as he continues to list a number of things that he's going to do, he is reminded of one thing that he said. He says, we will build girls' school, but one heckler, I'll call them a heckler because he does that in a manner that is actually heckling. He was reminded that the girls he had ruined their lives had no future. Indeed, we are told he had made several girls pregnant. That is unfortunate. But this was his main point, to show that he's going to be the change maker. He was going to do things differently. But when this happens, it is so important for him to begin to think, who is doing this? So because there are other contestants, what he does, he looks at his opponent. His opponent is Sori, as I mentioned, JJ Sori. So he knows it is not because of what these people know, it is because of my opponent who has caused this to be the reason that people are going to reject me. So what he does is now to begin to do a scheme which is going to bring down his opponent. He forgets about Adams completely because he knows the only person who could be a threat to him is JJ Sori. And so he works with his team, his campaign team. This is what happens whenever you are doing things. And he frames him as a devil worshipper. He frames him as somebody who practices sorcery. And what he does is he tells people, even his money is messed up. So if you touch his money and don't vote for me, you will die. So he convinces people in a way that is going to make everybody become very, very scared. Now, this is what is known as the dirty tricks of politics. It is something that every politician has to be aware of. And this is why we bring in our friend that we're calling here, Adams Leo, who is actually a newcomer on the scene. He himself believes that he is not a politician. What he wants to do is to continue being a good person who mentors young people and actually does his business. But he's encouraged and advised by the wife that it is a time for him to join the field or the arena and bring about some change to the people of Migodi. But do people see things differently? Yes. As he thinks about this and eventually says, you know what, I'll go in. This is Adam Leo Agadi. He says, okay, I'll go in. I cannot argue with my wife who is pursuing or who is insisting that I go into this politics. So he goes in, but he knows very well that his only weapon is his honesty, his truth, and promise of a better tomorrow. This is the difference we see between these politicians. Two have learned the tricks of the dirty game that goes on in politics. But this other person who comes in from a different background is going to go in and try to change things. And so the other thing which I mentioned here is the power of women. Adam Leo Agade has a wife who is influential. She's a lawyer. Her name is Susanna. Susanna is the one who, as I said, insists that the husband should try to vie for the seat. Susanna tells the wife, tells Adams that you are the right person for this particular area. Go there and work with the people. So she therefore exemplifies what we are calling women of influence, women who will change things. They may not be at the forefront, but they are at the back of everything that is going to be happening. They're the ones who will determine, they're the ones who will advise, even without knowing that they are advising. And so we see that this is what she does. Eventually, Adams decides to vie for the position as the future member of parliament, and also brings in another person who is also influential. There is a young lady in her family. This young lady is the one who takes care of the child, the only child they have at that time, Zen. Then is a young man who is born, but born to busy parents. So this young girl, Anita, is the one who actually shapes the future of the young person. And what she does is to show that women, even though they are not maybe in an office that is well established somewhere out there, they are doing their work very well. We also have another helping hand. This is Bonareri. Bonareri is one of the volunteers on the team of Adams. What her role is to mobilize people, to show people that things can happen if they come together. So together with other youths, they are working together to ensure that actually Adams Adage wins. And then another very unknown individual or character that Ogola gives to us is a professor who is vying for a position, or rather for the parliamentary seat in Migodi South. She's called Professor, her name is Sema Josephine Kasina. Kasina is one person no one took note of. Just as on this other, Agade was never really considered to be an important player. So she is contesting against Hadai Kora, who is actually the incumbent in Migodi South. What she does also is to defeat this particular old guard in politics. And the whole thing becomes like tables are being turned around, because for one, these were not people who could have actually done anything to change the political scene in these two constituencies. But because of how they approach the whole issue, because of their honesty, they have come to be the ones who have won. But more importantly, women have played a major, an important role here. We've seen Susanna, who has come in to help the husband. We have also seen, even for, sorry, as I said, the wife, he's the one who advises him, okay, you have been defamed, you have been blackmailed, but you can change the whole story by, being saved. Because once you say you're saved as a Christian, no one will question that. It is something that you know very well. No one is going to question, because they know, oh, that's a higher power that is at play. So these are the ways we bring in women and see how powerful they are. Apart from the women and how they're empowered, we see the youth who are also empowered. They have the power that we cannot take for granted. In the works that we are seeing, we look at two different players here. We look at GK, who, when he uses the youths, he uses them as hecklers, people who are going to harass the other campaign. That is so important for us. And when we look at that, we see that this is exactly what happens. However, when we turn to our other character, whose role is really to try and mobilize the youth, this is Adam Zadage. He uses the youth by empowering them. He gives them the power to design the campaign. He gives them the power to even design the slogans that he's using. So for example, there's one which says, Pamoja Twaweza. And then finally he says, Wakati ni sasa. These are so similar to what Obama would have done during the 2008 or when he was still a youth. And this is what actually Ogola borrows from. The community mobilization, the community organization, civic education, going door to door, telling people this is what you should do, so that when people go to vote, they are already empowered. This is so important. And it also brings about the idea of activism, how they are able to do this. So I thought this would be very important to try and show that analogy with what is happening elsewhere. Now,
2 more minutes, Dr. Muaka.
Okay. So when we look at the political discourse that is at play here, it clearly shows how politicians will do everything possible to, first of all, use style, to use footing, as I say, and position themselves either as domineering or as being people who can actually bring people together. When I read to you the first portion of the GK, what he did was to say, I am sure you're going to elect me. He was so confident. Whereas he is confident, Adage is cautious. He comes and says, I am asking you to join me to change the picture of our constituency. He comes in and says, I'm a son of a woman. That is so powerful because in this community, women are not going to be respected. So what he does is to come humbly, but also promise people that if they trust in him, if they buy his idea, they're going to be able to do a lot of good things. So this is exactly what happens. And surely after a while, the campaign is gaining momentum because people are now buying into his way of presenting, bringing people together, showing that he cannot do it alone. He admits that there are problems. He admits that there needs to be change, but he tells them honestly that it will take time for this to be able to come to fruition. So this is what we see in Migodi. And when he wins, it's because of that. The other thing that I want to complete here before Martha kicks me out has to do with celebration of indigenous identities and localism. This is what he does. I mean, what is done in this book, that we celebrate our local identities. Ogola talks about even ethnic foods. For example, she brings in food, which is in the Luo. She uses Swahili words. She uses even Luya words. I will read the Luya words so that you people may hear how Luya sounds. Liremwa nezinjuku. Okay. Those of you who have heard that language may have an idea, but this basically means bananas and groundnuts or peanuts. So she does this intentionally to respect the local power that there is in what we have. When the doctors come in, they are actually supposed to be given a chance to, well, somebody just came to warn me a second time. So when people come in, they are supposed to understand that local knowledge is powerful, it's a tool, and this is what we see here. So in conclusion, what we can say is that Ogola's work really reflects how communities come together, and when they're determined to make a change, just as we see the youth do this, it is a reflection of the need and the desire of this particular community. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Muaka. And thank you, Dr. Jabet and Dr. Lisanza. Great team here. We have very few minutes, and I hope the rest of us here might want to give us 1 or 2 minutes for the questions. The room is open for questions. If you want to drop your question in the chat, that would be great. Or if you want to raise your hand and ask your question, you're welcome to. And while you think about that, I see one question and it's directed to me. Could you comment more on the social and cultural implications of the Luo concepts of dark and what? Any possible philosophical connection with the concept of Ubuntu? And since we were analyzing the same text, I think I would welcome the rest of the panel to address this, but let me begin by quickly saying that dark in the text is defined as neighborliness or to live together, and what is defined briefly as brotherhood. And Ogola presents this from her Luo ethnic group, that to emphasize the fact that commitment to one's family and to the other people around is highly valued. There's strong commitment. We see this in the novel, and it seems to be a pivotal part of the family, that if communities are, if people have this commitment to the community, they do well. And anything that threatens this community, this unity, threatens life. 2 of her characters, one of them is Becky, and the other one is Akoko, the main character's brother-in-law, seem to kind of fail in life, and it's attributed to their going away from this neighborliness, from this brotherliness. There's that emphasis of that is how we survive. I don't know how to connect that to Ubuntu, but it sounds like that is it. It's you are because I am. When you walk away from me, you're hurting me, but you're also hurting yourself. Any comments from the panel?
I would say yes, it's there. It's just not pronounced in the text, particularly the Ogola's text, but definitely they have that concept, and of course it's also based in the traditional Luo cultures as well.
Mm.
Thank you very much.
There's another question. Yeah, sorry, I hope we answered your question somehow. The other question we have here from Rose is, I saw that Google honored Margaret Ogola in 2006. I wonder how Kenya responded to her literary production while she was alive and after her death. Does anyone want to respond to that before? Very quickly, Margaret Ogola's work was, I think, was really honored even before she died, because The River and the Source was a text that was used in literature throughout the schools in Kenya. For me, I think that is one way that a nation shows that it values this particular text, especially in countries like Kenya, where we often dismissed texts if we thought we were uncomfortable with their work. So allowing our text to be used in the schools was one big way of showing we appreciate your work.
Yes, her book also, The River and the Source, won Jomo Kenyatta Prize for Literature in 1995.
Right.
Yeah, I think there's a lot that has been done just to honor her. Even the book that I just analyzed, which was her last book, it was launched posthumously. As well. And, there were dignitaries. So again, as you've heard, it was a text in schools, which means it influenced so many lives. And to a large extent, that is an important, tribute to her and the many awards that she won.
And also when she was honored by Google, it's like almost everybody in Kenya was talking about this in 2006. So people are really proud of her work. And of course, given that she was a doctor, she went an extra mile to write these different novels, it really shows literature is respected in the country.
Yeah.
So do you use her texts in your teaching of literature here? Are her books available?
Yeah, I do. I've used her books in my African literature classes.
Yes,
so students can purchase them here in America?
Yeah, they are produced by Focus Books and you can get them.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
When you talked about Google's honoring of the author, I was a little bit, I'm always worried about the commodification of African culture or in general, like put in whatever, art, whatever. So I was wondering what was behind, or what might be, if you had any insights behind Google's honoring of her. Was it just a genuine, quote unquote, tribute, or just a question behind that?
Usually Google has been doing whatever they call Google Doodles. It's not just the African artist, but several people. However, I'm not aware about the commodification of it. I'm not very sure.
Any other question?
Biri has it and is muted.
And unmute yourself, please. Thank you.
Just a comment. I really appreciate the presentations this afternoon. And I was just taking a journey to Kenya as you were speaking, trying to see the political environment currently as we near elections for the 2022. And the three books were talking about empowering women, empowering the youth, and giving people mandate to do things. But when you go to the reality of things, I'm not being political though, but when you go to the reality of things, like the way things are in Kenya right now, I was listening to the Minister for ICT the other day. He was being interviewed in a KTN, and he was saying he's trying hard to empower the youth by going around the country and giving them information. But looking at things now, the politicians, do you think the politicians are in kind of empowering the youth, or it's just being in the books and it's being talked about, but they are not doing it?
Hey, Dillian, I think, yeah, that's a very good and important question. I think if you look, for example, at these characters that we just saw in Mandate for the People, is that really the mandate should be with the people. Unfortunately, the schemes that politicians do are the ones that are destructive. And because of the condition, the vulnerability of our youth, many of them are unemployed, they are used to create havoc rather than really to empower them. So a lot of them are in this particular situation. You hear some people calling others or themselves hustlers. You hear a lot of that kind of language. But what you're trying to show that is that this person doesn't have anything that they can give. So, and this is what happens in this book. They talk about people being bought very cheaply with a packet of flour, a kilo of sugar, and that's it. That's about $4 at most, and they're going to vote. So a lot of things really depend on the vision of that leader. Many of them don't have an ideology. They don't have a standpoint in their life. They don't have that vision. What is it that we want to do? It's about, give me your vote, and then that's a contract. I'll give you this much money and we'll go. Because this is exactly what is in this book. Really, how much money are we distributing? We need more, because if you don't have enough, you're not going to win. So it's an unfortunate, but we have a few good people. Unfortunately, they're not the ones who win.
Thank you.
Thank you for the questions. If we were at UNC, I think we would have loved to continue talking as we walk around the campus, or at Florida where we were last time. We could hang out and discuss this a little bit more, and many of the other great places we've been to, but we are here virtually, and I don't know, I think we may just have to say bye for tonight. And I'm going to send this back to who, Stacy or Samba?
Mohammed is here, and Samba.
Okay, all right, please, back to you. Thank you so much.
I think all we need, hey, go ahead, Mwalimu Samba.
Go ahead, I was just yawning. I wasn't speaking.
Okay, I think we make sure that please let's attend our panels tomorrow. It's equally very important. I see as we go along, the number is decreasing. Please let us not do that tomorrow. Let us be even more. I will all see you tomorrow. And thank you for the great presentations. Dr. Muaka was very silent today. Until now, I'm happy that I heard his voice. And Akin Lawyer, Ojo, Professor, all of you, bye guys. And Rosie, see you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Guys.
Bye.